So on April 12th, Blue Öyster Cult released Ghost Stories, which is a collection of slightly revised versions of songs that they worked on but didn't finish or release, mostly from 1978 to 1983. Now, if you consider the timeline of their discography, that would mean that these songs come from the sessions of Mirrors through Revolution by Night, which is maybe not the most classic period, but certainly a time when lots of worthy material was created. I won't go into too much depth about the process of making this album. There's a video on their official YouTube where Richie Castellano and Steve Shank discuss the process. That's very interesting and worth checking out. Basically what they did was they used AI to demix old in-studio recordings where they didn't have the multitrack. Then they used those demixed layers to build up something that sounds more like a finished album, with occasional new overdubs that seem as though they tried to be as respectful and as authentic to the original as possible. Now, without having heard those old versions, it's a little hard to say for sure how much of a difference that process made, and I will say that it would be nice if they had provided the unrestored versions as like a bonus disc, especially for weirdos like me who like to get views on their channel by comparing things like that. But, you know, if bootlegs of the originals have circulated, I was not able to find any info about them in preparing for this video. So with that background out of the way, how is the album? I mean, it sounds pretty much like you would imagine, right? Which is a set of mid-period Blue Öyster Cult songs that are fairly B-side-ish in quality, right? Not really up to the standard of the best material from that time, though entertaining in their way. Nothing here really catches fire in the way of the best stuff from 78 to 83, but, you know, there's also something that seems like it never should have seen the light of day, right? If you imagine your fondest hopes for what something like this might turn out to be, it doesn't quite achieve that, but if you imagine your worst fears about how it might turn out, it isn't that either. I will say this, though, you know, the times when I find this album the most charming, the times when I was the happiest to hear it, were the times when that unfinished character showed through the most, right? Where you had the best sense that these were songs that had been, that were works in progress at the time that the original development of them stopped. A couple examples of what I mean here. Check out this climactic part of the song Shot in the Dark.
I couldn't see it, but I heard a shout. Then in the dark, there came a shot in the dark, shot in the dark, shot in the dark.
Well, yes, you would think that a shot in the dark would come in the dark, right? Now, I'm not picking on that to be mean. I think that kind of detail is really charming to notice because that's the kind of thing that does tend to get ironed out in the finished version of a song. Another example is the song The Only Thing, which is a fairly lovely, spacey ballad, probably my favorite song on the album. But at the climactic moment in this song, when Buck sings I Love You, you can hear him kind of wavering at the end of the note, like he didn't quite have the breath that he expected, or he isn't sure how long he should be holding the note out.
I love you.
To me, that sounds like a world-class musician still feeling out the details of the song. Again, it's a really interesting thing to hear. And the track Don't Come Running to Me sounds like it's right at the top of Eric Bloom's vocal range. There's a slightly wavering quality to the first verse, like he wasn't quite warmed up all the way.
I see the smile, but I hear the lies. I see the looks you just can't hide. You think that I can't see right through you.
You can hear a sense of strain that is unaccustomed from a singer whose style is normally defined by a kind of swaggering confidence. In a perverse way, I wish there were more of these sorts of flaws, right? I love this band, and these are the moments when the past feels closest, right? When you can most imagine their long-ago selves in the flush of the creative process. If these songs are, per the title, ghost stories, then those are the moments that feel ghostliest. But then again, you know, maybe those are fun to catch, partly because they did survive the ironing out process that created this album. Maybe if the whole thing were demo quality, much more full of those kinds of mistakes, it would be less nostalgic, more exhausting. Now, I haven't read any reviews of this, which I try not to do before I do my own review, but, it wouldn't surprise me if there are some people being very, very enthusiastic about this, partly because it's, a batch of new/old Blue Oyster Cult material. That's something we maybe never really thought we were going to get again. Partly because this is the capstone to their recording career, right? It's a final cleaning out of the closets. Sounds from the press release like it's intended to be their last studio album. And, the people who are going to listen to this are the ones who will be the most likely to be, kind to this music because it represents the twilight of the gods. And I don't think I would go that far, right? These do sound like old Blue Oyster Cult, and that's great. They also, you can generally see the reason why these weren't developed into something that would make the cut on a finished album. There are riffs that feel generic. There are lyrics that maybe aren't as developed or as creative as even their middling work on a full studio album. Soul Jive is oddly stiff and slow for something with that title. The covers are a little bit underwhelming because, of course, live versions of We Gotta Get Out of This Place and Kick Out the Jams already appeared on prior live albums, and those live versions are frankly somewhat more energetic and engaging than the kind of more tepid versions presented here. It feels mean to dwell on those shortcomings too much, right? Because we should be grateful for getting a bunch of new Blue Oyster Cult material that is actually from relatively classic times. But it also feels Pollyanna-ish not to acknowledge the ways in which this does definitely come across like an album of, spruced up outtakes. More than anything else, though, this might be a marker of the times. In the video I mentioned about the production of this album, they refer to having to use the dime store version of the software that Peter Jackson used for the recent Beatles documentary. But, even if it's not as fancy a version as Jackson had, it seems to have been more than adequate to their purposes. So this may be in some sense a throwback album, in the sense that most of these recordings are older than I am, but in another way it may actually be a harbinger of the future. I do hope, though, that as the software evolves, it doesn't get to a point where those kinds of little, bugs and seams are totally worked out. If you're interested enough in this album to check out a review of it, then I'd certainly say you should buy it, but also, be prepared for it to be what it is. As always, I'm Hans from Electric Brain Electric Shadow. We are a contemporary art rock project mingling aspects of prog, post-rock, and post-punk. If you like these videos, then, you can support me by buying one of our albums on Bandcamp, or you can check out the link in the description for a playlist of our best work. Thanks so much for your time, and I'll see everybody in a week.